In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Marianne's guests are leaders in their field, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in their own work. They teach others to develop, refocus, and grow. Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. And remember, make every moment count.
Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so excited to be introducing our first guest, Leon Logothetis, and he's here today to talk to us about the Kindness Diaries. So welcome to the show, Leon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
What a joy it is to have you here.
It's always a pleasure.
So you've been traveling the globe, and I'm just really impressed with what you're doing, your messaging. And for our listeners that are new to your story, what inspired you to go out and spread kindness?
It's a great question. So I used to be a broker in the city of London. And on the outside, I had everything. On the inside, I had pretty much nothing. I felt emotionally and spiritually bankrupt. And I ended up watching the movie The Motorcycle Diaries, which is a romanticized version of Che Guevara traveling around South America, relying on the kindness of strangers. And there was something about that movie that really touched my heart, and I realized that there was another way to live. And I didn't have to sit behind this desk. I could go out into the world and connect and become a citizen of the world. And that's really how it all began.
Well, and I think a lot of people can relate where they feel that they're either in a job working and not really feeling fulfilled or feel like there's more out there or more that they can do. And so you probably get a lot of people reaching out to you in regards to that.
Yeah, I do. I think it's in many ways, kindness is certainly universal in the sense that we all need it, and we all have the capacity to give it. And I think it's also somewhat universal that people have either been in a situation where they're not happy with their work lives, or they are currently not happy. So it's kind of just, that's why I think people are so fascinated with what I've done, because it brings the kindness aspect and the work aspect.
And I think a lot of people are looking at it going, gosh, I wish that's something that I could do myself and be able to get involved. I know that the Kindness Diaries, you're the creator and star of it. It's on Netflix. And so through all of your journeys that you've taken, and I know there's probably a lot that stand out, but what are some of the most heartfelt or the ones that really stuck or touched you? An inspiring story.
Well, to me, one of the most inspiring stories was I was in Pittsburgh, and I took the motorbike, as you know, from Los Angeles all the way around the world with kindness. And I ended up in Pittsburgh, and I ended up chatting with this chap. And I would go up to people, and I would tell them my story, and I'd end up saying to them, can I live in your house tonight? And they would mostly say no, but some would say yes. And I asked this chap, and I said, can I live in your house tonight? And he looks at me and he goes, look, I'm really sorry, but I'm homeless. So in that moment, I felt a lot of shame because, I'm not homeless on this journey. Yes, I have no money, but in real life, I do well for myself. But this guy in real life had nothing. I was about to walk off, and he turns around and he says something to me that was just profound. He says, well, you know what? If you want, you can come and stay with me tonight. I'll feed you, I'll protect you, and I'll give you some clothes. And that's exactly what he did. And I ended up staying the night with him on the streets. And the next morning I turn around to him and I tell him what I'm really doing, because it wasn't just about giving and receiving kindness, it was about giving kindness as well. So I was able to put him up in an apartment and send him back to school. But the greatest lesson I learned from that journey was that you don't have to have a lot on the outside to give from the inside. And Tony proved that. He proved that kindness and compassion and empathy and heart comes from within. And you do not need to have a lot on the outside.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. During my travels, I've been to some countries that, like El Salvador, actually sticks out in my mind, and some of the most happiest and nicest people. And at the same time, there's a style of living that was a little bit lower than what we're used to over here. So it touched my heart. One of the episodes that I watched, the gentleman in Chicago that was holding a sign, and you touched on how he, wasn't being seen. And I think a lot of people suffer from that. That was one of the ones that you had that I just felt real inspired by.
Yeah, actually, that was from another adventure that was called the Go Be Kind series. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened in that was I went around the country connecting with people, and we ended up giving $1,000 to people. And yes, that chap was called Daniel. He was a homeless guy, and he had this really profound and beautiful sign about life. We ended up chatting. We ended up connecting. We went for lunch. And, I guess to me the greatest gift that I can give, as you mentioned, is to see someone. And, people just walk past homeless people all the time as if they don't exist. I was just in Santa Monica yesterday in Los Angeles, and I was sitting down just people watching, and I was just seeing these homeless people just walking past, and I felt to myself, wow, no one pays them any attention. It's like they don't exist. Yet they are no different to me and you. I mean, they are the same. They are human beings. They need to be seen. They need to be cared for. They need to be loved. Imagine you walking down the street or just being in your everyday life and no one sees you. No one pays any attention to you. That is soul destroying for a human being.
I believe that all humans want to be loved and recognized. So I can see where that. I mean, it touches my heart, definitely. I mean, I make time to talk with people as I go along my journeys, regardless, what's going on. So I think that's so important. And it really opens the eyes for people to look beyond, look up from the iPhones, or your smartphones, and just see the people that are around you.
Absolutely. That's it's a very powerful thing that you can give someone is your presence. And when you give your presence, you are telling that other human being that they matter.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the biggest lessons you learned along the way with all of this?
I think the greatest lesson, we've kind of touched upon it, but the greatest lesson is that it doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter what religion you are, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. Ultimately, we are all the same. And yes, we may have our unique differences and unique cultural differences, but at base, as a human being, we simply just want to be seen. And we will do everything in our power, good or bad, to get that.
Well, and I think being able to offer people an opportunity where they could connect with other people and be more engaged, I think that's really moving, humanity in a direction we would like to see it to go,
Yeah, I mean, let's imagine how the world would be if that was the most defining factor of who we are and how we show up. It doesn't mean that bad things don't happen, because they will, because as well as human beings have the capacity to be kind, they have the capacity to be hateful. And that's, it's not, I don't want anyone to think that I'm sitting here being Pollyannish and saying, oh, just be kind and everything will work itself out, because, sometimes that doesn't work out. Sometimes you have to create a boundary where if someone crosses that boundary, you need to stand up for yourself. But if each individual chooses to go out into the world and make a commitment to show up with dignity, to show up with kindness, to show up with compassion, and if by any chance you fall off that wagon and you have a bad moment, because you're human, I have bad moments, we all do, that's okay. Just get back on the compassion wagon and keep going. And many of us make a commitment to our work. We make a commitment to our kids. But how many of us make a commitment to fixing what's going on inside us? And once you make that commitment of fixing what's going on inside, what will happen is that you will then, the kindness, the compassion, the empathy, the understanding will overflow, and you'll have no choice, but just to give it away.
Well, and that's what a great place for us to be in, where we would all feel that just self-love for ourselves, but then be able to show it to our neighbors and the people that we come across as well. So, well, I know you have a new book that just came out, Live, Love, Explore. Why don't we talk about that a little bit? What inspired you to write this book?
Sure. So Live, Love, Explore is basically a book about finding the life you were meant to live. I've had the privilege of traveling the world and learning lessons that I would never have learned had I not traveled. And, one day I realized I've learned all these lessons. I've traveled the world. It's time that I give back and share. It's not just good enough to do it for me anymore. I wanted to give it back, and that's really what the book is about. It's all my journeys, not all of them, but many of them, and the lessons that I took from those journeys. And hopefully they inspire you and your listeners to go out and make something of their lives, because each one of us is magnificent. And we tend to forget that. We tend to forget our own magnificence. That's such a sad thing.
What a true statement, though. I mean, because we each have gifts that we bring to the world that no other person can bring, just like you with your journeys in this book. Each of us, to our own degree, have those gifts as well that we bring. So, oh my goodness. Now, let's, it's trying to fit everything in here, because I know we've got limited time today. It'd be easy to talk to you for hours on this topic, because you're such an inspiration. Now, the Kindness Diaries, why don't you talk a little bit about that and what's going on there and what we can expect?
Sure. So the Kindness Diaries is a journey where I purchased a vintage yellow motorbike with a sidecar, and I traveled all the way around the world, from Los Angeles all the way around back to Los Angeles. I had no money, no food, no gas, no place to stay, and all I could do was rely on the kindness of others. But there was a twist, and the twist was that unsuspecting Good Samaritans would receive a life-changing gift. So people like Tony, who helped me out of the goodness of his heart, then I was able to help him back. Mm-hmm. And there were so many stories, good ones and bad ones, from the journey, where it kind of inspired me to believe in the goodness of humanity. Ultimately, there is a notion of kindness that flows through us, yet too often we watch the news and we see all these negative things going on, and we believe that the kindness is not there, but it is.
Well, and I think having a point where people can kind of connect, you've kind of been that, it looks like, for people, where they're really involved with your story and the stories of others as you continue your journey.
Yeah, I used to be, and probably still am, if I'm honest, a news addict. And whenever I watch the news, I get depressed. And I'm always like, Leon, why are you watching the news? Like, why are you doing this to yourself? And I bring that up because many of us are the same. Mm-hmm. Watch the news, and the filter of the news is one of negativity. Imagine if we saw the world through a filter of positivity and compassion and empathy, not Pollyanishly, because bad things happen, I get it, but we looked at it from a more positive filter. Things would change. I really believe that things would change. And you can change a life by how you show up. And that's not a grandiose statement. It's a reality. How you show up in the world matters profoundly. And I think that's a really important message for people to remember. It's not a new message. It's just remember it. If you go out into nature, you see how connected we all truly are to this planet that we live on. And just showing up matters. How you show up matters, really.
Well, and it's all in how, cause it's interesting, along my journey, I've learned that people really do operate from their pain. And so if they're lashing out or sad or upset or angry, whatever the deal is, it's because of a pain that they really haven't been able to overcome or work through. And so having compassion for people where they're at allows us to go ahead and see beyond their pain to the person that they are, and have some empathy for them.
Absolutely. Again, it goes back to we are the same. We just want to be seen.
I think that's a huge message for a lot of people. You know, it's interesting. I lived in California most of my life and worked in the LA area that you were kind of talking about. You were out that way. There's so many people and people are so busy. It's easy to feel like you do not get seen being, you know, in that kind of big city environment. And people, I think, sometimes feel like they get lost.
Yes. And what I have noticed is that when you are around another human being and when you make that human being feel like they are valued and you make that human being feel like they matter, magic happens. Mm-hmm. Because that human being, you don't know what's going on inside that person's heart. You don't know what's going on inside that person's mind. And sometimes the greatest fuel is simply to show someone that their presence is important. Mm. And I've always said that kindness is simply making someone feel less alone. And when you make someone feel less alone, you give them the right to believe in themselves. And many of us don't believe in ourselves.
That's a very true statement. I mean, I can remember when I first was on my journey, you know, I really didn't have a belief in myself, and developing that makes such a huge difference. And when you tell people you believe in them, that makes such a difference as well.
It can be life-changing.
So what's next for you, Leon? What do you have next planned? Because it looks like you are just a mover and a shaker here. You've got something going all the time. It's all good stuff, you know?
Yeah. Well, two things. First of all, I'm working on a fall speaking tour, mm-hmm. Where I will be traveling across America again. I just finished another one, but in the fall I'm doing a tour where I basically give this message of kindness to schools, colleges, and businesses. And after that, I'm doing the Kindness Diaries again, but this time in an electric car. Instead of being called Kindness One, which is the name of the bike, mm-hmm. the electric car will be called Kindness 2. That's the journey, the next journey.
So the next journey is Kindness 2. Well, you know, let me know when you get to Colorado. Be happy to put you up and make sure you get a good meal on your your journey there. And, you know, on your website, I also noticed that you have the Human Interaction Project. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Human Interaction Project is basically giving kids from 18 to 30, the opportunity to go out into the world and do something similar to what I did. So it's all scholarship-based. You get the chance to go out into the world and help, maybe in Cambodia, maybe in Ghana, maybe in a hospital or an orphanage. You then get the chance to find one person or an organization that you feel deserves to be helped financially. We will help them financially. And then you get to come back and give a talk on everything that you've experienced.
That's fabulous. Well, there's a lot going on with that as well. So is that project already ongoing, or?
Yes, it's ongoing.
And then will you be announcing the people when they come back, like their trips? Is that going to be announced on your social media? Because I want to hear more about that too.
That's up to them to announce. Mm-hmm. So once they finish, they will do the speech, and when they do the speech, if they want us to put it on the site, we will.
Okay. And so before we go, Leon, where can people connect with you if they want to get involved? How can they do that with you?
Well, the best way really is to Google the Kindness Diaries. That will bring up the Netflix show, and it'll also bring up all of my Facebook, Twitter, contact details, and Instagram.
Oh, perfect. Well, and of course, we want to remind everyone to go pick up your book, Live, Love, Explore. It's available now at Amazon and all major retailers. And also be part of Leon's community, which I'm just signed up for all of his good stuff. You want to make sure you do that too. Leon, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
As we say goodbye to Leon of the Kindness Diaries, which is available now on Netflix, You do want to stay tuned for the next part of Moments with Marianne. Our next segment coming up, it's Pat Craig of the Wild Animal Sanctuary, which is one of the oldest and largest nonprofit sanctuaries that's in existence for captive, exotic, and endangered large carnivores. And then our last segment for today is Dr. Tasha Eurich, who's here to talk to us about her new best-selling book, Insight: Why We're Not as Self-Aware as We Think. Wonder what that's all about. So anyway, you've been listening to Moments with Marianne. If you'd like to check out more about the show, visit momentswithmarianne.com. And we will be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so excited to be introducing our next guest. He's quite a humanitarian, and he's part of a great organization that I think everyone needs to know about. This is Pat Craig, and he's here today to talk to us about Wild Animal Sanctuary. So welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to talk today.
Oh, hey, we appreciate having you here. Well, and I know you through a friend who actually is very involved in the Wild Animal Sanctuary. What is the Wild Animal Sanctuary, and how did that come into being?
The Wild Animal Sanctuary is a carnivore sanctuary primarily. That's what we deal with. We take in lions and tigers and bears and wolves and leopards and mountain lions and bucks and coyotes, and so pretty much omnivores and carnivores that are all that are displaced, basically. These are all been confiscated from people who have tried to have them as pets or were kept illegally or in abusive situations. And so it's the first sanctuary of its kind. It was started 37 years ago when nobody was helping these kind of animals, and many zoos were euthanizing lions and tigers. And so we started the sanctuary to take those in. It was like a humane society, but obviously we don't adopt them out. And basically, these animals needed a place to go, and so for 3 decades now, we've been taking them in and giving them a wonderful place to live.
Well, I know some of these animals are not just within the U.S., that you get animals from other countries that desperately need medical attention and just they're usually confined in small cages.
Yeah, we definitely, the problem started, as I said, like 37 years ago is when the sanctuary was founded here in the United States, and that was when the problem first started of animals like this showing up in the private sector. Up until then, they'd only either been in the wild or in the zoos, and nobody really had them in a way that they would have them as a pet or try to have them as a pet, or there was no access to them. But once they were kind of dumped into the private sector, as surplus from the zoo system, then they started to be bred and sold for being pets and other things. And so once we started to fight that problem here in the United States, we spent many years getting laws passed against making it illegal to have animals like this as a pet or whatever. And then just as we thought we were starting to get this under control here in the United States, the problem spread to many other countries, so also North and South America, and now it's throughout Europe and many other countries where there's people now doing the same thing and getting lions and tigers and breeding them and selling them and trying to have them as pets and just doing anything they can to try and make money off of them. So now we actually travel all over the world to rescue these animals.
So how many animals do you currently have?
We have over 450. So there's, for example, we have just about 200 bears that live here, and that includes grizzly bears and brown bears and black bears and even Kodiak grizzly bears. And then we have about 80 African lions and about 70 tigers, and they're on down from there. But so it's large quantities of animals. But the big difference with the sanctuary is rather than just keeping them in cages, the thing that we pioneered many, many years ago was to build large acreage habitats that are more like natural spaces. And so once an animal gets rescued, they get to go and be rehabilitated and then released into these large acreage habitats where they can live in a more natural lifestyle.
Now, how big is the wild animal sanctuary? Because I know it's quite large.
Yeah, we currently have 720 acres, and we just put an offering to buy another 400 acres. So very soon here it'll be over 1,000 acres.
Oh, that's perfect. And I know with the sanctuary, you have the walkway where people can come into the sanctuary is actually elevated, so it doesn't disturb the animals. Because I know you have it separated in different areas for like the tigers and the bears. And
yes, and that was really critical because even though we were in operation for many, many years, we really weren't open to the public for the first 20 some odd years, and we were just rescuing animals and providing a good home. But we wanted to educate the public about the problem because very few people knew that this was even an issue, and so we wanted to be able to have people visit and see the animals and read their stories and learn about where they came from. But to do that, we didn't want to encroach on the animals' life. They were very peaceful, and all animals and even humans and other species are very territorial. And so anytime people are walking around on the ground, that becomes a threat to a lion or a tiger or even a horse or a cow or whatever. And so for all the years that zoos have allowed people to walk around and look at exhibits at ground level, that puts all that pressure on the animals, and that's why you see them pacing, is that they feel like that's a threat to their territory where they don't consider sky or air to be territory. And so if you build an elevated walkway like we did, which goes over all the habitats that we have here, then people can walk above them, and it doesn't bother the animals at all. And so they get a great view of the habitats, but at the same time, they're also solving the issue of not creating any disturbance for the animals.
Now, didn't you guys win a Guinness Book of Records for that walkway? I mean, it's kind of a little tidbit, but I found that to be pretty interesting, too.
Yeah, it wasn't our intention at all to set any kind of records, but the walkway goes over a large majority of the habitats, and so it's over 1.5 miles long. And so one day we just decided to look it up, and we realized that it was actually the longest elevated footbridge in the world. And so the Guinness Book of World Records came out and certified that, and so we actually have that record now.
That's pretty funny. Well, why don't you share with us like one story that really touches your heart of one of the animals that you guys rescued?
Well, it's kind of hard to pick one out just because every one of them comes from such bad situations. But we have some that have just been amazing. We had an African lion that was kept in a concrete pit by himself for about 15 years, and he was got as a cub, of course. And then when they realized he was going to get too big and too dangerous, they thought they'd just put him into this concrete pit, and then that's where he stayed for all these years, by himself, until he was rescued by our own organization. And then when he came here, he was rehabilitated and got to meet other lions, and then released into one of the habitats. And then he started to work his way up through the pride. So we have these actual functioning prides like they would be in the wild, other than they just don't have to hunt for food. But so he worked his way up through there, and then eventually became the king of the pride, and then ruled as that until the day that he finally passed away when he was about 23 years old. And so he got to have the last 7 or 8 years of his life living much more naturally and happy and part of a family group. And so you can only imagine what the first 15 years of his life was like, where he just all he could see was the sky straight up and no natural grass or trees or dirt or anything.
And to be such alone through that time, I know that you guys do get some animals that are in some pretty bad shape, and then it's you spend that time rehabilitating them. What's the average time that it takes to really rehabilitate one of the, like, let's say, like you took with this tiger?
Yeah. Well, they all vary. I mean, it depends on how much they've been abused by people, because obviously a lot of it has to do with trust. And So much like abused children or humans, they take time to regain that trust and believe that not everybody's a bad person. And so some of them that weren't severely abused and were just, let's say, bought as a cub, and within a few months the people realized that was not a good idea, and it's already tearing up their house and biting people. And so some of the cubs we get in can be rehabilitated and put out with other tigers within, a few months, where some of the ones that were actually beaten and abused in some of the circuses that we've rescued, those tigers and lions can take, a year or more before they feel comfortable with others, even their own kind.
Yeah, it's quite a process. And I know over at the Wild Animal Sanctuary, there's quite a lot of ways that people can participate and get involved. I know that you guys have it where people can sponsor an animal and be part of that. Can you explain a little bit more about that, how people can be involved and donate and all that good stuff?
Sure. And obviously, as I said before, we're open for education, so a lot of people can go to the website and learn there and then come out to visit if they happen to live in this area. And if they don't, the website has tons of videos and other things to explain that. But we are a nonprofit, and these animals exist only because people support the organization through donations. And so one of the ways that we do that is people do a virtual adoption where they obviously don't take over and take it home, but they support them for as little as $10 a month or $20 a month. They can support one of the rescued animals, and we send them an adoption package which has a certificate and framed picture, and just more information about the animals, and then they can help support that animal that way. And we also allow people to do pledges where they just do the same thing but without having to be a specific animal. And so we have a number of ways that people support the organization, but that's the only way that we operate. It's all 100% through donations. We don't get any federal funding or any kind of state or federal funding. And so it's really just one of the best ways for people to be highly engaged with the animals that we rescue, and at the same time helping them.
Well, I know, and it states this on your website too, that the Wild Animal Sanctuary is one of the top 5 animal welfare organizations in the world. It's been awarded that. And it's kind of nice to hear, especially, I'm here in Colorado, so it's nice that, people can come down and look at the Wild Animal Sanctuary and be a part of that and also donate, but just the great work that you're doing there. And I just wanted to thank you. I think you're just doing such an amazing job.
Well, thank you very much. We definitely are reviewed by all the charity watchdog groups and have one of the highest ratings there is. And as you said, we were awarded one of the top 5 animal welfare organizations in the world. And so, it's just important that our work stands out, and that we're very transparent about what we do and encourage people to learn more about us.
Oh. Well, and for our listeners, to visit the website, it's wildanimalsanctuary.org. Pat, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. We really appreciate you spending the time with us and talking to us about the Wild Animal Sanctuary and all the great stuff you guys are doing there.
Well, thank you, Mary. I really appreciate your time as well, and hope the listeners take a look at the website and go from there.
Oh, without a doubt. Everyone should head over there, take a look at the website, and see how you can get involved today. So we're going to pause here for a quick break, and we will be right back after these messages.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com. Ben Wexler is a gifted leadership development and strategy consultant for professionals who want to transform their organizations and careers. Through a uniquely personalized set of processes, participants discover their unique knowledge, how to leverage that knowledge and experience, and then put it all together with a global strategy. You're more valuable, your organization is more valuable, and the change is viral. Contact Ben at 630-881-1074. 630-881-1074.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. Our next guest is here today to talk to us about her groundbreaking book, Insight. We're not as self-aware as we think, and how seeing ourselves clearly helps us succeed at work and in life. So let's welcome to the show Dr. Tasha Eurich.
Thanks for having me.
What a joy it is to have you here. So your book just hit the stands last month. How exciting. And I had to get my hands on it because it really does bring a whole new discussion around the topic of self-awareness that most people are not having.
I agree. Yeah, it's sort of amazing to me with how scientifically important this skill is for our success and our happiness and our deep and lasting relationships, that there haven't been a lot of scientific inquiries into this topic. So I was really excited to work on this project.
Well, and so I know that you did all of your own research on this. How long did that take you? And what really prompted you to go ahead and start diving into this topic?
I've been an organizational psychologist for almost the last 15 years, and one of the things that I am constantly inspired by are the transformations that my executive coaching clients make. A lot of times I'll come in and frankly, they'll be pretty unself-aware, and very often when someone like me is brought in, it's because they're, for lack of a better word, crashing and burning. Mm-hmm. But in the process of working with so many clients who really didn't just turn their professional life around, but turned their entire life around, I realized that these transformations of self-awareness were indeed possible. But I also noticed that there wasn't a lot of really rigorous scientific investigation of this topic. There was a lot of platitudes. People would write articles that said, you want to be self-aware, get more feedback. And that's certainly true, but there's so much complexity to it. So about 3 years ago, I set out on the first of its kind journey to learn more about what exactly is self-awareness, what are some of the myths around it, which I was surprised to find even more than I anticipated, and then what can anyone who wants to improve their self-awareness actually do to have those better choices and better relationships and better life that I think anyone who is looking for self-improvement seeks.
Now, that brings me to my next question, because in your book, you also talk about, that we're really defining self-awareness all wrong. So what should the definition be, and how should we be viewing that?
That is such an important question, because you're right. Everyone looks at it just a little bit differently. And so my team and I spent almost an entire year just reviewing all of the research that existed. It was almost 800 studies to figure out what exactly is self-awareness. And here's the definition that we came up with. It's basically made up of two distinct types of information about ourselves. The first is something I call internal self-awareness, which is what most of us think when we hear that term. It's that inward understanding of our values, our passions, our aspirations, what we want to get out of life. But at the same time, it has to be accompanied by something I call external self-awareness, which in a nutshell is understanding how other people see you. And what was so fascinating to me about this definition and these two sides of the coin were that they were completely independent. So you have people who are low on both. I think we all know some. There are people who are high on both, and I spent some time really investigating these people. But you also have people who are high on one and low on the other. So an example might be someone who's high on internal self-awareness. They're convinced that they understand their inner essence and basic, everything about themselves, and yet they have absolutely no idea how they're coming across to other people. Or the vice versa, which is you might be so interested in how other people see you that you're not really in touch with what are your best interests and what are the choices that are going to make you happy. So there is a lot of very interesting complexity to even what that definition is.
Well, I think you worded that very well, especially because it's such a topic. So many people really do throw around that term. Oh, if 5 tips to self-awareness, do these things. And I think it's important to really dive into that and look at that other half, because most people don't really realize, what other people are thinking about them. And
they really don't. Yeah. And I hear people all the time, people sometimes do not agree with my definition of self-awareness. They say things like, well, it doesn't matter what other people think of me. All that matters is how I see myself. And respectfully, if we want to live in this world and if we want to have deep and lasting relationships and be successful at work, we have to understand how we're coming across. We might not always agree. We might not always even decide to change, but we have to know. We have to have that basic understanding.
Yeah, it actually reminds me, I think there's a new movie coming out that Shirley MacLaine's in, and she's having someone write her obituary for her, and she sends her to all these people, and they just can't stand her. So it's interesting. It just kind of brings, it's kind of a little off topic, but it brings back to, what we think about ourselves versus what other people think. So in your book, you talk about the elusive self-awareness unicorn. So I thought this would be a great time to talk about that as well.
So these were people who basically made these against all odds transformations, who started out as either, quite delusional about themselves or even just not very self-aware. Mm-hmm. And throughout the course of their lives became incredibly in touch with who they were and how they were seen. And so what our research team did is we didn't want to study people who had always been like that, because a lot of times when somebody just has a natural gift, they can't explain it or they can't break it down for the rest of us. So we studied these people to learn what were those, sort of major activities or major events in their lives, or even the daily habits and commitments they make that helped them get there. And so we found 50 people all around the world, and even finding them was difficult because you think about, I could have sent an email to everyone I know and said, hey, are you self-aware? Why don't you come be a part of our research? And of course, we're going to get the most delusional people possible in that grouping. So there was a lot of very rigorous assessment, and they had to fill out an assessment. Somebody who knew them well had to sort of agree with that evaluation. But we found these 50 individuals, and they just taught us not only what it means to be self-aware on a daily basis, but so many of the myths that surrounds, just the platitudes we use that we think make us more self-aware, but quite often don't actually have that effect.
Well, and I know on the website for the book, insight-book.com, there's a quiz that people can take with, like how you're saying, with their friend to go ahead and determine their level of self-awareness. How do we determine who's the best person to help us with that, with this quiz, and who are the people we would want that kind of feedback from?
Oh, I love that question. I would encourage all of your listeners, if you're even just moderately curious about your level of self-awareness, it's a pretty quick quiz. It takes less than 5 minutes. And then, as you said, you send it to someone who knows you. I think maybe what I would advise people is, what's the area of your life that you find to be particularly important right now? For example, maybe you just got a promotion at work and, everything's kind of on the line. So if you want to get a read on your self-awareness in a work context, you might pick someone at work who both supports you, right? Someone who wants you to be successful, but someone who's also going to want you to be so successful that they're willing to tell you the truth. And that person is what I call in the book a loving critic. So I think it's really about picking the sphere of your life where you're the most interested in getting some feedback, and then making sure that that person you pick is going to be honest and supports you.
Well, and so what are some of the invisible roadblocks that are in our way to having the insight that we have in regards to ourselves? What are some of the common ones that you see?
Oh, there are so many. Maybe I'll just boil it down to a couple of the major obstacles. Mm-hmm. So the first is I call them blind spots. And there's been a lot of research on this over recent decades, where we found that going all the way back to Freud, people do have an unconscious, right? That certain thoughts or feelings or behaviors that we simply can't access. And Freud was actually wrong in all of his thinking that we could, if we sit on a psychologist's chair and talk about our mothers and our childhood, there are so many things about ourselves that we simply cannot see, no matter how hard we try. Mm-hmm. So that's just how we're wired. Another main obstacle is something I call the feel-good effect. And what that is basically is our need to see ourselves with rose-colored glasses. And, there's a lot that contributes to that, but part of it is, it's like refined sugar, is an analogy I use. If I eat an entire bag of M&Ms, it's going to feel like a great idea at the time, and I'm going to feel awesome. But in the long run, it's not healthy for me. And that's the same way with sort of having these overly grand visions of who we are and what we represent. Not to say that self-awareness means hating ourselves. It's quite the opposite, but I think it's important to see ourselves clearly, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then quickly, the third obstacle that I talk a lot about is something I call the cult of self, which is basically just our society as a whole is tempting us all to become more self-absorbed and less self-aware. And a lot of times we get sucked into that without even knowing it. So in sum total, it's no wonder that most people are not as self-aware as they think. We're fighting these battles almost every day.
And your dog agrees.
She would not.
And just kind of an observation here in your book, you discuss about how thinking about ourselves, such as in mindful meditation or other paths that lead to introspection, it doesn't always correlate with knowing ourselves. And I found that to be extremely, well, of course, insightful. And and I think many people would be surprised to hear that.
I was absolutely shocked when I uncovered these results. Basically, to vastly oversimplify it, I and others have found that people who spend lots and lots of time pondering themselves, finding their inner reality, not only do they possess less insight and self-awareness, but quite often they're more depressed, they're more anxious, they're less happy with their lives.
Gosh, we can talk about this all day. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. Dr. Tasha, where can people connect with you and learn more about your book?
They can go to insight-book.com.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tasha, for taking the time to be with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne, for having me. I appreciate it.
We're going to... Well, that doggy has a lot to say. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to tune in today. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.